Welcome back. You are watching News Center. Global heating and refrigeration provider Carrier reported sales of $20.4 billion in 2022, down 1% since 2021, and free cash flows of $1.4 billion. For 2023, the company is targeting sales of $22 billion. In India, the company has been present since 1986. The company has a manufacturing unit in India, in Gurgaon. How important will the India market be for the 108-year-old American company? The Indian government has launched a PLI scheme for the air conditioning sector with incentives worth 6,238 crore rupees. The aim is to increase domestic manufacturing of air conditioners. India also brings a big opportunity as only 8% of homes have air conditioners, and according to reports, this number could go up to 40% by 2038. Joining us to talk about Carrier's bet on India is Carrier's global CEO and Chairman, David Gitlin. David, thank you very much for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. Let me begin by asking you about the growth that you're expecting in 2023. You've already issued an outlook saying that you expect sales to the tune of $22.4 billion this year. How much of that growth is going to come from India compared to other geographies?
Well, overall for Carrier, and Parikshit, thank you so much for having me. We're looking at mid-single-digit growth for Carrier this year, and we'll get outsized growth in India. You mentioned that we have a facility here where I am close to where I am in Delhi, but in Gurgaon, and then we also, with our partner, have an operating facility down in Pune. We have 4,500 employees in the country, and this is one of the most strategic growth vectors for us globally. So we are extremely bullish on India, not only as a market, but also as a source for phenomenal talent, whether it's manufacturing, digital talent, engineering talent. So we are coming in extremely aggressively into India. We've been here, as you said, with manufacturing going back to 1986. But we believe India is at an inflection point. So we are extremely excited about not only manufacturing talent, but building our workforce here significantly.
Right. So if you're talking about expanding presence in India, give us a sense of how many more employees or jobs would you like to add to your India operations? What is the manufacturing capacity currently? And is there a plan to ramp up manufacturing as well?
There is. Today we do not only a certain technology called variable refrigerant flow and light commercial manufacturing and even residential, but in some of the higher end, we do what's called screw compressors. For kind of mid to high end facilities, we're adding centrifugal compressor technology here in the March-April timeframe. So we're going to significantly expand our manufacturing presence in country. What happens when you do that is it starts to build out the entire ecosystem. With that, we're going to quadruple our supply chain spend in country over the next 5 years. So build manufacturing, increase supply chain. As you do that, you win more projects. You win more projects, you're adding more service personnel, more technicians, more engineers to support the new design, more digital support. So we see employment that, again, with our partners is about 4,500. We see that increasing a couple thousand over the coming years.
How much are you likely to invest in the India market, in your manufacturing and R&D setup here in India over the next 5 years, if I were to ask you?
About $800 million. If you look at our investment over the last decade, it's been a little over $1 billion in India. When we look out over these next 5 years, we're going to invest another about $800 million in country.
Okay. About the China Plus One strategy, this is a time when India-US relations are at an all-time high. And you're smiling at this question. I'm sure you get a lot of it. This is a time when many American companies are being encouraged to move out of China or go and set up in countries which are friendly to the United States. How do you see India in that strategy? Do you see moving some parts of your manufacturing supply chain from China into India?
Well, we see growing India, period. You know, whether it's from any country globally, we see an enormous opportunity to significantly increase our investment. When you step back and look at the supply chain challenges that most of the last 24 months, what we've realized is that we have to avoid any single point of failure. So if there's any country where we supplier that could affect our entire operations globally, if that one supplier want to build redundancy into the system. So it's not just a China plus one strategy. It's really a strategy focused on India. We believe this country is at a significant inflection point. And you look at the transition within India over time, agriculture, services, manufacturing, high tech. We believe that if you look at the talent, the infrastructure, and the opportunity in the country, it's significant. And as you said in the lead-in, only about 8% of the residential homes in India today have air conditioning. It's north of 90% in countries like the United States and Japan. So we see growth in air conditioning, both for residential and commercial, growing exponentially. The interesting thing is that as you grow air conditioning exponentially, we have to make sure that we do that in a way that is friendly to the environment, because 40% of carbon emissions come from buildings and 40% of that from HVAC systems. So as the country goes through a hypergrowth in the GDP, as the country goes through hypergrowth in our industry, we have to do it in a technology that is friendly to the environment. And I think that's where Carrier and our brand that we bought last year, we bought Toshiba's business, HVAC business last year, and we're buying the German company Viessmann's HVAC business as well. As you bring those kinds of brands and technologies together for the Indian market, we have to bring technologies that are energy efficient and climate friendly, and that's exactly what we do.
What is the kind of growth year on year that you're targeting in India over a 5-year to 10-year horizon? If I were to ask you year on year growth starting 2023.
It's going to be double-digit growth in India. So we think that if you look at India as a percent of sales for overall Carrier, we think it's going to grow exponentially. And it's not only because of the investments that we're making in manufacturing and supply chain, but we look at this as such a target market for us. In fact, just before this interview, we met with some of our dealers, and I asked them what verticals are very strong in India, and they said, you name it. Higher education, pharma, semiconductor, where we just had a very big win a couple of weeks ago. If you go across all the verticals within the country, what you find in most countries is that some verticals are strong and some are weak, and we try to be very agile and move our sales efforts and our technology to the verticals that are particularly strong. So if in a certain country warehouse slows, but data centers is strong or manufacturing strong, we try to shift a lot of our efforts to the verticals that are strong. What's very unique about India right now is you're seeing strength almost across the verticals. Country GDP growing from $3.5 trillion to becoming in 2030 the world's third largest economy at about $6 trillion. That's about an 8% CAGR. And at Carrier, we've committed to our investors to grow 6 to 8% a year. So we need to be very prevalent throughout India to make sure that we can hit the commitments we've made on the growth side to our investors.
You mentioned semiconductors. Are there any specific areas of interest in India for the future?
Well, one thing that's particularly of interest to us is all things energy efficiency. You know, the company that we're combining with, Viessmann Climate Solutions in Germany, they're the only company in the world for residential that does a combination of solar PV, battery, and there it's prevalent as heat pumps. Perhaps for India it's closer to air conditioning, which is electric powered, with a digital overlay that interfaces with the grid. Because the fundamental problem that is going to exist not only in India but globally is that the capacity of the grid to keep up with the demand just won't be there. So we're going to need to work creative load management within homes and within buildings to make sure that we can support the increased electrification trends that are happening globally. We can do that not only supporting buildings and homes with solar PV, battery storage, and things like heat pump and electric air conditioning systems, but then also very innovative digital solutions that can help manage the loads for peak and off-peak hours and then do an interface with utilities. So all things energy management is of particular interest to us.
And finally, any policy tweaks or policy interventions that you would like in India? You've not applied for the PLI scheme because you're majorly into commercial air conditioning. Any specific asks of the government in terms of easing policy regulations?
Look, we actually met with government officials earlier today, and we are so pleased with the relationships not only between the United States and India, but the way that the Indian government is so business friendly for folks like United States companies to locate here and locate here in a way that encourages investment in India. We could not be more pleased with the government incentivizing continued investments here. So anything that incentivizes jobs, manufacturing, us building out our supply chain, engineering, R&D, all of those investments that further incentivize to increase our investments here are deeply appreciated. And then it's all things that relate to sustainability. Any incentives from the government that help drive that transition to more renewables and more energy efficient solutions for homes and buildings, that's right in our wheelhouse. And any incentives there, it's good for business, but more importantly, it's good for the planet for generations to come. And we want to be part of that solution.
All right, David Gitlin, thank you so much for joining us here on CNBC TV18, giving us your vision, blueprint for India. $800 million is what you're looking to invest, and you're looking at double-digit growth in India year on year over the next 10 years. Thanks once again for being with us here on CNBC. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of News Center. More updates when we're back.